So, have you ever heard of a PowerPoint deck getting downloaded like 15 million times? It sounds crazy, right? But back in 2009, this simple slideshow about Netflix's company culture just exploded in Silicon Valley. It totally changed the game for how people thought about management. So what on earth was in that deck that was so powerful? Well, let's dive in and find out. Our guide on this journey is the book Powerful, and it was written by the person who actually co-created that legendary document, Patty McCord. And get this, she was Netflix's chief talent officer for 14 years. So she wasn't just watching from the sidelines, she was the architect, building this whole thing brick by radical brick.
And this wasn't just some flash in the pan. I mean, you've got people like Sheryl Sandberg from Facebook calling it the most important document to ever come out of Silicon Valley. High praise. So what made it so different? Well, it systematically busted some of the biggest, most common myths in management. Let's tackle a big one right now.
Okay, myth number 1. Rules create order. You know the thinking, right? The more policies, the more processes, the more approval chains you have, the more you can control things and stop chaos from breaking out. But Netflix looked at that and asked a really different question. What if the exact opposite is true?
And you can see the two completely different philosophies right here. On one side, you've got the old way, which is all about control through tons of complex rules. But the Netflix way just flips that completely on its head. It's about simplifying everything down to one single core idea. Hire fully formed adults, and then just get out of their way.
And this, right here, this is the foundation for their entire philosophy. It's culture rule number 1. We only hire adults. But what does that actually mean when you're talking about a company?
Well, it means you hire people who don't need to be micromanaged. You know, they're self-motivated, they're disciplined, and here's the most important part, they can be trusted to act in the company's best interests. You just don't need a 1,000-page rulebook for someone who already knows how to do the right thing.
So how do you actually put this into practice? I mean, this is the crucial part. Take their famous vacation policy. They just got rid of it completely. No tracking, no approvals. They just told everybody, take the time you need. So what happened? Did the place fall apart? No. People acted responsibly. The work got done, and a whole layer of bureaucratic nonsense just vanished overnight.
So it really all boils down to this. When you start from a place of trust, you can just start dismantling all those systems that were built because of mistrust. You can get rid of travel and expense policies and just replace them with a simple idea. Act in Netflix's best interest. You stop relying on rules and start relying on context and good judgment.
Okay, but hiring adults, that's only half the battle. If you really want to empower them, you have to take on the next huge myth, the idea that information is power, and that it should be kept locked away at the top. You know, in so many companies, knowledge is hoarded by senior leaders, and it's only shared on a strict need-to-know basis.
And you can just see the two different worlds this creates. The old way builds these information silos, where people only ever see one tiny little piece of the puzzle. But the Netflix way? It's all about radical transparency, making sure everyone understands how the entire business works, from the very top to the bottom.
And that brings us to culture rule number 2, which is an absolute game changer. Why? Because think about it, you can't expect people to make smart adult decisions if they don't have the full context. It's just not possible.
Patty McCord has this incredibly blunt line in her book. She says, if your employees do something stupid, it's not their fault, it's yours. It's because you either gave them the wrong information or you just failed to inform them at all. Their ignorance is your failure as a leader. Oof.
So how do they actually do it? Well, they created something they called New Employee University. Picture this. For a full day, every single new hire gets to sit down with all the department heads. And these leaders don't just talk about their wins. They talk about their biggest challenges, their metrics. But here's the key part. They weren't just lecturing. They were actively encouraging questions and even challenges to the way things were being done.
And this is where the magic really happens. You have an engineer, someone with literally zero background in content licensing, who puts up their hand and asks why their complicated windowing system for movie releases worked the way it did. He just said, it seems stupid. And that one simple, maybe even naive question from an outsider helped spark a revolution in their entire content strategy. That is the power of transparency. And that brings us to our final myth. And honestly, this might be the hardest one for a lot of us to unlearn. Myth number 3, harmony is key. We're so often taught that the kindest thing we can do for our coworkers is to just be nice, right? Avoid those difficult conversations that might hurt someone's feelings. But, of course, Netflix has this totally counterintuitive take.
They argue that always trying to be nice is actually a little bit selfish. The truly helpful thing to do is to practice what they call radical honesty, because that is what helps people and the business actually grow.
So this leads us straight to culture rule number 3, radical honesty. It's all about creating a culture where feedback is given in the moment, it's constructive, and it's delivered directly to the person's face, not whispered behind their back in the hallway.
Now let's be super clear about what this means. This is not a license to be a jerk. Not at all. It's about being open and timely with your feedback and doing it face to face. It's about completely getting rid of the toxic, inefficient world of office politics.
And to make this really practical, the leadership team modeled this super simple framework. They called it start, stop, continue. So in meetings, they would literally go around the room and tell each other one thing to start doing, one thing to stop doing, and one thing they should continue doing. It's just a structured, actionable way to practice this idea of radical honesty.
And this quote gets right to the heart of why this is so difficult for us. Our instinct is to avoid conflict, to make people feel good. But that urge to dodge a tough conversation, so often it's not really about protecting the other person. It's about protecting our own comfort. And by holding back the truth, you're not helping them. You're actually harming them by letting a problem go unsolved.
So when you bust all these myths, the one about rules, the one about information, the one about harmony, what are you left with? Well, you're left with the absolute core idea of the entire Netflix culture, this deep, intertwined belief in freedom and responsibility.
And this all leads to their ultimate conclusion about what really motivates people at work. Forget all the perks for just a second. The single best thing you can do for your employees is to surround them with other high-performance people. Because at the end of the day, the real perk isn't the free sushi or the ping pong table or even a big bonus. The real perk, the thing that gets truly talented people excited to come to work every single day, is the chance to tackle incredibly difficult problems with an amazing team of colleagues they genuinely respect.
And that leaves us with one final question for you to think about. What's the one stupid rule at your job? That one process that you've always known was a waste of time that you could eliminate tomorrow if you just decided to treat everyone on your team like a fully formed adult.